Do you know what this is? This is a ruler. Do you know what it's used for? It's for measuring things. A ruler of the sort that I have right here is usually 1 foot long. That's 12 inches. We use feet and inches in America to measure things. Sometimes people use what's called centimeters, meters, millimeters to measure things as well. Well, we're going to measure with something even more different today. Instead of using inches to measure, we are going to do what's called non-standard units of measurement. We are going to measure some different objects using little squares. Okay, and then later on, we will continue measuring objects using paper clips. Okay, so we're really going to be comparing these bigger objects to our squares and saying how many squares long is this pencil or marker. Okay, so let's look at this together. We're going to just start with the pencil. I'm going to move the other things out of the way. Okay. Looking here at this pencil, if we want to measure it using squares, we would need to start at the beginning and we would need to go until the end. Do you see how I've lined up the beginning of the pencil, the point, with the beginning of the square? And I've lined up the end of the pencil, the eraser, with the end of the square. Okay. When you're measuring, you start from the beginning and you go to the end. We don't want to add extra things before, and we don't want to add extra things after either. Let's see how many squares it takes us to get to the end of this pencil. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm not quite to the end. But if I put an 8th one here, I go really far past the end. So which is it closer to, 7 or 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is closer to the end of the pencil than 8 is. 8 goes too far. So we would say this pencil is about 7 squares long. Get a little closer so it's easier to see. Okay. Now notice what else I'm doing as I lay these squares down. I'm not leaving any space between them. They are touching end to end. If I left space between them, I might think that the pencil was only 5 squares long. But that's not counting any of this empty space. So when we are going to measure things, we don't want to leave gaps. We want to measure from end to end without leaving any gaps in between. Okay, let's look at another thing. I'm going to just make this a bit longer here. And I'm going to ask you about how long is this pair of scissors? Okay. Notice when I put the scissors down, I lined up the point with the edge of the squares. Then I can see which square is closest to the end of the scissors. I would say this square is closest to the end, which means that the scissors are about 5 squares long. Let's try another one. Look at the crayon. About how long is the crayon? Now you'll notice that I did not put the crayon all the way to the edge, which means you're going to have to think about which square lines up with the end of the crayon. And which square lines up with the end of the crayon? Did you say the crayon was about 4 squares long? That would be correct. I'm going to turn this. We were going on how long things were because we were going side to side. If I go up and down, I'm asking about how tall something is. About how tall is this set of paints? One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and there's a little bit going on to the 10th, but I think it's still closer to 9 than it is to the bottom of the 10th. So we would say these watercolors are about 9 squares tall. How about this glue bottle? Notice I'm still lining up with the end. Even when I'm measuring height, I want the edge of my measuring tool to match the edge of what it is I'm measuring. About how tall is this glue bottle? Did you see it lines up about with that yellow one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This glue bottle is about 6 squares tall. Okay. I'm going to show you a marker. And if the marker is 1 square from the point to here, about how many squares do you think it is to get all the way to the end? This is called an estimate. We are making an educated guess. We know how big 1 square is. And so we're going to guess how many squares it takes to fill up the length of this marker. What do you think? Get your idea in your head and then we'll check it. Let's find out. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is about 5 squares long. Is that what you guessed? Did you remember that you needed the squares to be touching each other and not leaving space in between? This is what 4 squares would have looked like. 4 squares would have to leave space in between. This is what 3 squares would have looked like. Even bigger spaces are left between. 6 squares would have been too big, going past the end of the marker. So the best guess would have been 5 squares. How did you do with that? We are going to practice that non-standard units of measurement as we do our math today. Have fun!